Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to my garden. If you're new here, my name is Kiera. Feel free to call me Q. And today, what I wanted to do is go through and just evaluate everything that's happened in the garden this year. So we're pretty much at the end of our summer garden right now. We're gonna start like pulling things out, and I really want to just clean a lot of stuff up. A couple videos ago, I did a garden tour after our garden had basically been neglected, just completely let go for a month after our baby was born. And so we have been just adjusting to parenthood and things like that. What I wanted to do before we like really clean things up and take a lot of stuff out here and start really transitioning for fall is to go through and evaluate. I really love doing evaluations for like everything. Anytime I do a project, I love doing the like what worked, what didn't work, and then what I might want to change in the future. And I thought it might be cool to kind of take you along, one, so that you are up to date with, the things that we tried in this garden, what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I think I might want to try next time. But also, this is just documentation for me so that when it comes time to plant this garden again in the spring, I can look back on this and say like, oh yeah, I did want to try that thing, or oh yeah, I did that before and I really didn't like it. Or I want to double down on that because it was great. So we had a lot of all of those different categories. I got my notebook with me today, and we're going to go through in no real particular order, and I'm just going to document how the garden did. So I'm glad you're going to join me for this. Let's get started. Just when we're ready to start, it is sprinkling now. We have this random day where it's really cool and really nice outside, but we do have rain on the forecast too. So I'm gonna go inside before my camera gets wet, and we'll come back to this. Okay, I changed my mind. I'm gonna risk it a little bit. I don't currently feel any raindrops, so we're gonna see how far we get. The first thing that I want to talk about is tomatoes. So we had an awesome tomato year this year. I've never grown so many tomatoes. It was amazing. And the first thing that we did as far as like evaluation was we trellised in a bunch of different ways. So the first one we did was kind of the Josh Satin trellis to make you jealous. It's basically the one that's behind me where you suspend your plants up 1 liter, and you use like string or twine or something like that to suspend them up. And that is something that we've done in previous years. It worked really well for us, and so we did that behind me. And the other things that we tried differently this year is we tried cattle panels. So we grew tomatoes along two different cattle panels. One was raised off the ground about 2 feet. One was right on the ground. And then we also tried the Florida weave method, where you basically put string in between your tomatoes. So as far as how those 3 methods worked this year. So the first one was the suspension string. Like I said, that's something we've done in the past. It's worked perfectly fine. This year, we had a lot of issues with it, and it was totally user error. So the first one was I didn't prune the plants nearly enough. At a certain point, I just kind of stopped pruning. I was very pregnant and there was only so much I could do. And so the plants got a lot of suckers. For this method to really work, you do want to kind of keep the plants really clean, so it does require a lot more maintenance for them. And so stopped pruning at a certain point. The other thing too is we used twine, and the twine just broke. So this happened last week. So the twine finally gave up the ghost. Oh, hi, buddy. Hi. Remy just came around the corner. Hey, bud. Hi. Yes. Hello. Hi. This is way too close. Okay, watch out, buddy. Okay, back up. Good, back up. So these plants, the twine finally just gave up the ghost and snapped last week. So all in all, it lasted pretty well for the season, especially since like I said, user error, I did not set them up for success at all. I will use this method again, but it's one of those things keeping in mind of like how much pruning do you want to do, because this one does require more maintenance than other methods. So next up, let's look at the Florida weave. This is something that I said early on, it didn't work because I didn't work it. So these were Roma tomatoes, so they are a bush variety, And basically what happened is it got really wily on me really fast, and I just kind of stopped trying to string them. This method, I'm not going to say that it doesn't work at all, because I know it does. There's plenty of farmers that use this in entire fields of tomatoes. It just didn't work really well for me. I found that I don't really want to have to go back and try to manage the string around each individual plant and rope them around and do it multiple times and all of that kind of stuff. So for me, I won't be doing this method again, just because I just didn't really want to do it. To be honest, I didn't want to put the effort into it. Once the season got going, I just kind of wanted the plants to just be and do their own thing with minimal effort from me. So this is a method that I'm just not going to do it again. Okay, it's raining for real now. Let's go inside. Hey guys, so it is several days later at this point. We had multiple days of rain, and we ended up, doing different things around the house, running errands, and the days just kind of got away from us every single day. So anyway, I'm back now, but several days later, and this is where we left off. So talking about our trellises. So we did 2 tomato trellises that are just on 16-foot cattle panels this year. This was brand new to us. One of them, this one, we raised 2 feet off the ground, and then we have another one that we had just determinants, so shorter Roma tomatoes on, and that one is just ground level. And overall, I really like this method. I'm definitely going to be doing this again. I really, really like growing on cattle panels. The thing with these back ones here, this worked really great. You can see that we have, way in the back, we have some cherry tomatoes and some Amish paste tomatoes that did get to the top of this trellis. And so it's about, I want to say 6 feet. Yeah, they're about 6 feet high right now. We've had plants get way taller than that, and these plants did struggle a little bit, but we still got a lot of food off of them. One thing I do want to say about the placement here is this is in the way back of our garden, and we were just trying to like fill spaces. These particular tomato plants got just beaten by the sun because this is west right here, and so they just got a ton of sunlight. We did get some sun damage on them, more so here than other places, but I mean overall still did really well, and it was extra tomato plants that we were able to plant more of than we normally would if we had just grown things in the beds. I may or may not put this trellis in the same spot next year if we do tomatoes again, but overall they did pretty well. Okay, so now I'm back behind our other tomato trellis that we did on a cattle panel. This one is north, is this direction, so the garden is south that way. This one did really well, especially towards the end of this trellis. This one is all Roma tomatoes. I don't know exactly how many plants we had on here. I want to say it's something like 12 or 16. I'll count them and put it on the screen. But these plants did really well, and I definitely would grow Romas like this again. The one thing I will say about this is I did think that these plants were supposed to get taller. So on the seed packet, it says that they get, 4 to 6 feet tall. And all of these are about 2. And then we got a couple plants that did really well, and they got like 3 feet tall. But that being said, I was super happy with this. We got a massive amount of tomatoes off of this trellis and the other section of Roma tomatoes that we had, where it was just 3 plants in the Florida weave that I didn't do. I was going to say that Florida weave that I did. The Florida weave that I didn't do, let's be honest. We got a massive amount of tomatoes off of those. So I love, love, love the cattle panel trellises for tomatoes. I figured I would because it's what Jess from Roots and Refuge does. But I definitely want to be doing this again. I think what I will do next year is I want to grow more Romas than anything else as far as paste tomatoes. We had a handful of Amish paste, which are indeterminate plants, so they're the ones that get really tall. And they did okay, but they just didn't do super well. Again, like I said, they were just beaten down by the sun on the other side of the garden. And these had a little more shade. So all of that being said, though, we got a massive amount of tomatoes from the Romas. I did write it down. Let me look in my notebook. We got 16 pounds of Amish paste tomatoes and 103 pounds of Roma tomatoes, which is nuts. We'll definitely be doing this again. I would love next year to do 2 rows like this, so 2 cattle panels of just Romas. I think that that would be ideal, with maybe like a pathway in between or something like that, or maybe just on different parts of the garden. I think that would be just really great. We ended up with, I have to count them, but it was like 20 something jars of tomato sauce, which my goal for my goal for this garden was to eventually get to the point where we could grow a year's worth of tomato sauce. I thought that was amazing, and I thought we would honestly be really far from it. And we knocked it out of the park this year, which is wild. And it's also really cool because I found out that we don't need nearly as many tomato plants as I thought we did. And which means we don't need nearly as much space dedicated to tomato plants as I thought we did. So if we just do like, 2 cattle panels like this, we're set. So I love that. And it's so great to know now that we can do that. We can produce that in this garden. That's another reason why I really like the fact that we weigh everything that comes in, because it's one thing to see it and be like, oh yeah, that's a lot. And with the tomatoes, we get the sauce, and so we can see like, oh yeah, we processed sauce 3 different times, we got this many jars. That's a lot. But then to be able to go back and look at our records and say, we grew this much in weight for all of these different plants is really cool. And what we really love doing with that information is also looking up how much that produce would be worth grown conventionally if you just got it from any grocery store. And then also if we were going to get an organic version, which from the farmer's market is usually where we do a lot of our produce shopping, to be able to compare not only how much weight-wise is coming out of our garden, but how much money we're saving. Saving. I should say how much money our produce is worth. That's coming out of our garden is really awesome, because we're not really doing this to save money, honestly. Like, gardening is expensive with all the infrastructure and all of that. Even having the raised beds and stuff like that is just, it costs more, but this is the way we like doing it. Anyway, ramble over. But I was really happy. I was surprised even with the productivity of the tomatoes this year, and we will definitely be doing that again, or doubling down on it. I might double down on this. Okay, so the light's not great right now because it's noon, so the sun is right above my head. But I wanted to also show you these tomatoes behind me here. So these are 2 slicer tomatoes that I got from the farmer's market this year. They were the 2 starts that I bought. Everything else I started from seed. And this one was a Hungarian heart, and then this one was a yellow brandywine. They were the only 2 slicers that we had in the garden. This year I really was just prioritizing the paste tomatoes because I wanted to grow as much tomato sauce as possible, and now I know that we can accomplish that pretty easily. So the thing with these tomatoes, the Hungarian heart tomato was very sick. It got some sort of blight early on, and so I did have to do a heavy pruning on that, but I was able to kind of like bounce it back, which was great. And the fruit off of these was really, really good. The Hungarian heart was amazing. The fruit that came off of it was phenomenal. There wasn't very much, but it was really good. So we would have those on sandwiches and stuff like that, and it just made the whole sandwich a million times better. It was fantastic. And I say that as someone who doesn't really, or used to not really like tomatoes. I was like, yeah, they're okay. I'll eat it if it's there. But I definitely am the person that if a tomato falls out of my sandwich while I'm eating it, I may or may not put it back in. So that's where I land on tomatoes. But growing tomatoes and having, heirloom tomatoes and all of that is like a totally different experience. And so these were amazing, to the point where I would eat them on their own. They were really good. I would like to grow both of these varieties again. With the Hungarian heart, I want to see if, for some reason it was something weird with the plant that I got, or if in general that variety just is more susceptible to disease. Because one thing we have here is it's really dry, and so we don't really deal with a lot of humidity or anything like that. And so I was actually surprised that this tomato plant got as sick as it did as early on as it did. So I would like to try that again. But the main takeaway that I got from this experiment is I want to grow a couple more slicers just for fun. What I'll probably do from now on is I will get a couple slicers just from the farmer's market so I can try different varieties. I thought it was really fun to just have, you know, a plant of each one of these different varieties so that I could try it out and have it in the garden, have a couple of them. And I think that that's going to be a really good thing for us because then we're not buying entire seed packets unless it is, you know, something that we really end up loving. But for the most part, I do want to just utilize most of our tomato growing space for paste tomatoes to make sauce. So this was really fun. So I think I will get like just a couple plants from the farmer's market in the future too. Another thing that was kind of a last minute experiment in our garden this year was this pumpkin patch in the ground here in the back. In the past, I've grown a couple really small sugar pie pumpkins on the trellises, and I've gotten a couple pumpkins. I think last year I got literally 2, and I was happy with that because I've been working on growing pumpkins that I can use to decorate and then also that we can eat. And it's been really nice to, you know, have those pumpkins, decorate with them in the fall, and then make pie out of them. And pumpkin pie is my favorite pie, so it works really well for me. I really like it. This year, what we decided to do, since we had so much extra space and kind of what will be kind of the perennial loop of our garden, is I wanted to just kind of throw a pumpkin patch back here. And so a few months ago, we decided to put a handful of sugar pie pumpkins and Howden pumpkins back here. Now, for these plants, for the most part, they were the plants that I had extra of. So for the sugar pies, they were basically where I had put 2 different pumpkin seeds in the main garden in the beds, and then both of them came up, so I needed to move one of them or kill it, you know, so that the other one could have enough space. And so what I did with all those extra plants, I put them back here. I think I moved 7 plants back here, and we ended up with 5 that survived, which was great. And, you know, I put them in just different parts of the garden. We have another massive one over by the Roma tomatoes where it just was. So these did pretty well. I mean, we're getting pumpkins back here, which is really exciting. The one thing that we need to just be on top of next year is making sure that they don't go through the fence. And so what has happened is they kind of got away from us a little bit and they have gone rogue. So they're going right through what is a chain link fence between us and our neighbors. Our neighbors are lovely. We love our neighbors, but we are trying to be good neighbors and keep our stuff on our side of the fence. And that is not always happening with these pumpkins until it's too late. So we've been able to grab a few of them, but some of them are just far gone and, you know, growing in the neighbors' yards. And so we're apologizing, but they're also getting free pumpkins. So next year, what we will do, maybe we'll put some sort of barrier down, but we will also just be really making sure that we are staying on our side of the fence and being good neighbors. Oh, and the other thing about pumpkins in general is I would like to grow more of the really small decorating ones. So I don't have any of the like itty bitty guys. I'd like to grow those in orange and white for decorating. I think that that would be really pretty. Andrews also said that he wants to grow more of the different color ones. So like the big kind of like bluish, greenish pumpkins and all of that kind of stuff. Those are supposed to be really good for eating also. And he really likes those, and so I think it'd be nice to just have more colors. So this was just an experiment for this year, but now that I know it works, we're going to do more of it, and I will continue to grow pumpkins, the small ones on the trellises, because we have so much trellis space. But I really like what happened here in our ability to have a pumpkin patch. One thing that is kind of like pumpkin goals for me is to have enough to decorate with, but really I want to grow enough pumpkins so that all of our friends can come over and bring the kids and we can do pumpkin carving and pumpkin painting here in the backyard and have like a really nice just autumn dinner and just have everybody over painting pumpkins and carving pumpkins. I think that that would be really cool. So that's my real pumpkin goals. We'll see how close we get next year, but this was a really promising year for pumpkins. It is much nicer in this little pocket of shade. It's not even that hot today. I think our high today is 80 something, but it's pretty toasty in the sun. So next up on the list is peppers. So if you were with me early on this spring, you will know that I had quite the adventure when it came to seed starting my peppers. I have a couple videos on it, which I'll link below. But basically what happened is I'm not very good at starting peppers. That's just the long and short of it. And so I started a bunch in, paper towels and containers with that kind of like germination method. And it wasn't that successful. I was trying it with a bunch of seeds that I'd saved, and it just wasn't very good. So I was nervous that we weren't going to get enough peppers or very many peppers. And so I bought a couple more seed packets of varieties that I really like. And then I started a bunch more. So long story short, I ended up with, I think, 140 pepper plants, which is insane and entirely too many. And they are all out here. So we have way more pepper plants than we've ever had before, and we are getting a lot of peppers off of them, but I think that's mostly just because we have so many plants. And I really want to continue to work on having healthier pepper plants, because mine aren't really getting like bushy. The leaves aren't really dark green when we put them out. And I know that we could be getting a lot more per plant than we did. So this year's great, again, because we got so many plants that we're getting a lot of peppers, but I do want to grow fewer plants and just grow them better. One variety that we tried, or two new varieties that we tried this year, are the Sweet Bonnet, which is the non-spicy version of a Scotch bonnet, and then we tried an Edgevarsky. I might be saying that wrong. I'll put both of those names on the screen. But we tried an Edgevarsky also. And the Sweet Bonnet, we decided it's okay. We grew it. We probably won't grow it again, just because it didn't do enough for us as far as, the flavor of it. It was good. It was really good. But it was just kind of like not worth it to us because it tasted very similar to the sweet peppers that we grow. And the Edgevarsky, I will definitely grow again. They're these really big. Do I have any behind me? I don't have any directly behind me, but they're really big sweet peppers, and they are fantastic. So definitely be growing more of those along with our Italians. We tend to stick with Italians and things like that more than just the bells. We don't grow very many bells just because for us, we can get that at the grocery store. It's not that expensive. And we'll grow a couple, but we really like the Italians and the flavor profile that they have. And then the other one that we grew was, as far as sweet peppers, was habanadas. We love habanadas. We knew we loved habanadas. This year it seems like they came on really late, so we haven't actually gotten any yet. But it looks like some of the plants are finally starting to, the fruit is there, and so they're finally starting to change color a little bit. So I think we just have to wait a little bit longer. But I think in previous years it was one of the first peppers that we got. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. But anyway, we'll continue to grow that again. That's one that we just like having on our garden. And then we grew jalapenos and poblanos, a few of each one of those. The jalapenos, great. We always pick our jalapenos when they're red, and they have been doing great. The poblanos have not produced anything yet. They're there. There's a little bit of fruit on them, but they're not doing super well. So I got to figure out what I'm doing wrong with those. One thing I do want to make sure that I do next year that I didn't do this year, I planned on it and then it just got away from me and then I just didn't do it. So it was a whole process there. But one thing that I didn't do was actually topping off or pruning the top of the peppers when they were little so that they could bush out more. And so we ended up with all of these really tall, skinny pepper plants here instead of, big bushy ones. And that definitely affects our yield because the bushy plants will create more fruit. So that is something I need to make sure that I do next year. That's one of those things. It always kind of gets away from me. And then I have flowers on the little itty bitty plants, and it kills me to top the peppers off because it's just so much work to grow them in the first place. But that is something I need to move to the top of my list again, because this is another year, 2 years in a row now, where I really got to see the difference that not pruning the top of the peppers makes, because the plants, they're still getting really tall, like they're still a decent size, but it's nowhere near the size of the actual plant or the fruit that we could be getting. So that's something to work on for next year. All right, so next up we have the noodle bean trellis that you can see behind me here. And basically this is just, yes, I loved it, I'm gonna do it again. Now I'm in across the garden again, and I am in the arch that is half noodle beans and half blue lake pole beans. I really like this one too. This one was really great. So the noodle beans over here, we started a few weeks after the ones on the previous side. And that worked out actually really well because there's a humongous black bee that just went right behind the camera. Planting these noodle beans a little bit later worked out really well because when those were starting to get too big in the back, I was able to come over here and we still had young, fresher ones. And that was clutch after, you know, our baby was born and there was only so much we can do in the garden. So we really had to choose and prioritize. It was really nice to be able to pick these and just kind of let the other ones go, and we can save those for seed. It's no big deal. But I really liked kind of how those were staggered and not having both of them fill out and be really beautiful, honestly, at the same time. I liked having kind of like a couple weeks difference. And then here behind me, these blue lake pole beans just did a fantastic job of filling out this trellis. So it's basically a wall. I can't see through to the to the other side of it, and it's really cool. That's actually what we wanted. The thing about these pole beans is they did way better on this side of the garden than the other side of the garden. This side gets more shade. They were also planted a couple weeks after. And so overall, these plants were really happy and healthy the entire time, whereas the ones on the other side really struggled in the beginning. And some of them are starting to produce now, but a lot of them, you know, they just look really bad. So I think what I'll do too is grow more of our beans on this side of the garden just because they did really well with the shade. There's a bug up here and I don't know what that is. All right, guys, help me out. Can you see that? What is that? I have no idea what that is. Behind me here, I have 2 tomatillo plants, and they are gigantic. For these, I started 4 tomatillo seeds. We got 3, 2 survived. And from those 2, we have this tomatillo jungle that has taken over about 6 feet of this bed in one direction. And then they have gone completely about 2 feet out of the bed on this side, and they've grown completely across to the other side of the bed and then up that arch trellis there. So these are going to require a lot more space next year. People have warned me that we are now going to have tomatillos forever in this bed. I'm okay with that. I'm okay taking out plants. This was just an experiment. The other thing too was when we had these plants started, they either went here or, you know, there was nowhere else to put them, so they would have just died. So I'm happy that we put them here. I'm happy that we got tomatillos from them. Sorry, sweaty. The sun is like, actually you can see where the sun is on my forehead. So anyway, these plants are massive. We're getting a good amount of tomatillos on them, and they're covered in flowers, they're covered in bees. So I think that we're gonna get a lot more as this season goes on, because we still have a lot of days until our first frost. I think we still have like 90 something days still until our first frost. What I want to do with these next year, one, I want to definitely put them somewhere where they're not in the bed, so to have that spot prepped for them in the back perennial area. And 2, I kind of like what they're doing here, growing up this trellis. And so I think I might give them a cattle panel or 2 and just have them have a designated spot where I can also just kind of like weave them up a little bit. They're very unruly right now, which I kind of like. I'm not gonna lie, I like how unruly they are. But I want to experiment with this a little bit next year and see if we could grow them a little more effectively. But we have successfully grown tomatillos now, which is pretty awesome. So while we're talking about trellises, for the most part, I grow things like melon, squash, cucumbers and the pole beans up our trellises, and I really like that. I'm going to continue to do that. And what I did this year is I focused on having amaranth and sunflowers growing on the outsides of the trellises, so really tall sunflowers. And I really liked how that turned out to just kind of like frame the different sides of green with pops of color. And then what I did on the inside of the trellises, you can see kind of behind me here, is I would put in between the different plants, I'd put either basil, so this one was a purple basil, or I'd put a zinnia flower in between the trellises and in between kind of the plants on each side of the panel. Really love that too. What I'll do for next year is I think I will focus on specifically putting zinnias or the really tall flowers. So I might do this with cosmos, and I did it with straw flowers too, and I really liked that. But I might just put flowers in between the bigger plants like the squash and the cucumbers and stuff like that, and then save the basil plants for in between the pole beans, because the squash and cucumber just kind of like ate the basil alive, and it was really hard to find underneath there. But the flowers kind of always found a way to poke out, and that's what I wanted with the flowers anyway. I wanted those pops of color to just be kind of like popping out, and so that worked really well. But what I'll do with my herbs like the basils and stuff like that, I will definitely put those more with the pole beans, because they have a fighting chance next to the pole beans that they really just don't have with the melons and stuff like that. Next up for things to evaluate is the cut flower garden. So we have 3 4-by-8-foot beds right in the middle of our garden. And what I decided to do with them this year was to kind of practice doing a cut flower garden. So a lot of these flowers, most of these flowers, I'd never grown before this year. I'd grown zinnias before. I think that's mostly it, the zinnias and the amaranth. But the cosmos, the snapdragons, the specialty marigolds, and honestly the specialty zinnias, I'd never grown those before. And and dahlias. We did dahlias too. And so varying degrees of success and not success with those. But overall, having the cut flower garden, early on in the season, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do this again. I liked it. It was pretty, but I didn't really see the value. I wasn't cutting very much out of it. But I will say that once it got going and I was able to go through the garden and create bouquets for people, for myself, and also to give them away, I really liked having all these flowers right in the middle. And then I would go off in other parts of the garden and, get flowers from the other places that we had them. But it was really nice having just this area to experiment with and to see how these plants grow in rows. I also just don't grow plants in rows. And so this was really cool to have this. I think I will do it again next year, mostly because it got away from us. I never, did any trellising support for these. And it just completely got away from us. And so I think I'll do this again because I want to see if I can do it better next year before we move on to expanding anything with this or doing it differently. I think I just want another shot at doing it well in this little small area. So the main things I want to do with this, some of these varieties I'm going to try again. And there are other things like the cosmos. I now know that I love growing cosmos. And so I am going to put cosmos in other parts of the garden. And I also want to try different varieties because I feel like I grew them pretty well this year. So I feel really good about that. The snapdragons, they didn't do very well. I did basically everything wrong with them, but we still got some really pretty shorty guys. So I want to see if I can get those to be bigger and stronger and taller next year. And then the amaranth, it did really well. I want to see if I can actually use more of that and plant them closer together so that I could get more plants out of it. The basil in here got eaten alive. I have no idea why. I had never had anything eat basil or marigolds in my garden until this year. So I want to try those again because I had basil that I could pull from other parts of the garden, but I didn't really have anything in the actual cut flower garden that I could use. And then the last thing was the dahlias. So we got like 3 dahlias that survived out of the ones that I had planted, which I'm totally fine with. I'd never done dahlias before, especially not from seed. And so I want to try that again. And yeah, I think I just want to try the cut flower garden again and give it another shot before I just completely write it off. But I did enjoy having it later in the season. It was really nice to have this area that's designated right in the middle that was just, covered in flowers. I really like that. But definitely putting more flowers in other parts of the garden too. One thing that's pretty much done in the garden right now is all of my sunflowers. I have one more bunch of them here. These are Autumn Beauty sunflowers behind me. And then I have one other huge one over there that I thought was supposed to be either an Autumn Beauty or a Junior Yellow, and it's clearly not. So I have no idea what that one was, but it was awesome to have. And it got really tall and just like a million heads on it. It's fantastic. But one of the things that I want to do next year, and it's because of the situation I'm in right now, is I want to have way, way, way more sunflowers. Sunflowers are my favorite flower, and so I want to have way more of them in the garden, especially the Junior Yellow ones. I love those. I love that they're shorter. I love that you can kind of see them mixed in with the other plants that you have. It's just lovely. So I want to have just a ton more of those. And then the other thing that I kind of worked on a little bit this year, but it kind of got away from me, was I really wanted to stagger the planting of those. So more successions of sunflowers. One thing I wanted to do this year that I never got around to was just having actually a block of sunflowers in the perennial loop. I never got around to planting that, and so that is something that I want to try and go for next year. But in general, just having, the sunflowers, especially on the edges of all of the trellises, I thought that that was really pretty, but most of them didn't come up. So I did plant a couple successions of them, just putting seeds in the ground a few times over the spring. Most of them did nothing. And so what I think I want to do next year is be more intentional about that and really spend extra time making sure that those seeds come up, planting more than one seed for one, to make sure that something comes up, and then maybe starting more sunflowers inside, because I had a couple that were like that I seed started and they did okay. The strongest sunflowers I had, I will say, were the ones that I just put the seeds in the ground, but I would rather have some sunflowers early on, and then I can just keep trying to put more seeds in the ground as the season goes on and just do that. I think if I do it fully through the spring and then maybe around this time of year two and doing more for the fall, I think that that would be pretty good. I have sunflowers that I am starting in the house right now, along with some of our like fall winter stuff. And so those will be out here pretty quick. And I think I'm just going to keep putting more seeds in the ground because I would like to have way more sunflowers into the fall, especially the Autumn Beauty ones. Like they totally scream Autumn Beauty. So very well named. But I need more sunflowers in my life. So I'm in the part of the garden that the grass has completely taken over. So I hope you can see this. But next up on the list is zucchini. We had the best zucchini and yellow squash year that we have ever had, to the point where it became very much a problem. It was an excellent problem to have, but still a problem. And so what I did was I planted 3 zucchini plants and 3 yellow squash plants. I did all of them this year, just seed straight into the ground. That worked really, really well. And we got, on this side of the garden, all of the plants just took off. So all of them did really, really well on this side. I will say that in these beds, these were the beds that we put in at the beginning of this year. And so they got filled completely to the top with brand new compost or compost and soil. And then the ones on the other side of the garden, those beds just got topped off. So they weren't as kind of like nutrient dense as these beds here. So that might have been a big part of it, but these plants did amazingly well. There was one plant on the other side actually that did really well too. At this point, we are just letting these plants go. We're not taking any more zucchini off of them. We have a ton in the freezer. We ate a ton. We gave away a ton. So what we're doing now is I'm going to take these plants out, and I actually started new ones inside. They might not do as well, but that's okay. If we have zucchini in the fall or not, we're good with it. So that's just an experiment, mostly because these plants are still here at this point. But in the next week, probably, I'll take these out and put the new plants in. That's to give us a little bit of a break, but also so that we can hopefully, decide that we want to enjoy zucchini again in the fall, and it'll be there. The thing that I want to do with these plants next year, honestly, I'm really happy with them overall. But the thing I want to do is just kind of trim up the bottom a little bit better. I definitely want to give them more space. I always feel like I'm giving zucchini a ton of space until they get full size, and then I can't find whatever is underneath them. So there are lots of pepper plants that are planted underneath these, and they just, got just eaten alive. So I want to give the zucchinis just a ton more space next year. And I think what I might want to do too is, I talked about this, but again, it was something I never got to, was I want to try staking them. I've seen people put a stake, like a T-post right next to their zucchini plant, tie the plant up the post as it grows, and it becomes kind of like a zucchini tree. I want to try that. I've always wanted to try that. I just never get around to it, and then the plants get too big to the point where you can't move them. So that is something I want to do next year. Okay, it is very, very hot out here. So I am in the shade, even though what we're talking about next has nothing to do with this part of the garden. I just want to sit in the shade and talk about it anyway. So another thing that we did this year, and this was just kind of a throwaway thing, it was not something we did intentionally at all, was our potatoes. So we grow potatoes in 5-gallon buckets, and we really like doing that. It's really fun to kind of just like toss the bucket over at the end of the season, see how many potatoes you got, and it's easy cleanup. This started when we had a lot less space in our old garden, and this year we had the potato buckets ready to go. We had extra potatoes that just kind of like started sprouting in our house, so we just threw them in the buckets. It was not intentional or deliberate at all. Sometimes they got watered, sometimes they didn't. And so overall, the plants did not do very well. We got like a handful of potatoes, but we weren't really expecting anything. It was completely just a throwaway thing. So next year, what I want to do, I still would like to grow potatoes in buckets. I really do like doing that, but I want to have them in this part of the garden where we can put a drip line on them. That's what we did in previous years in our old garden, is we had kind of like a drip line going around across all the buckets, and that worked out really well. And then it was not something that we had to water on our own or remember to water on our own. So what I love to do with gardening too is, as many things as I can put an automated watering system on, I want to do that. So it's just not reliant on us at all. Another thing that would be cool to do next year is to look at other ways of growing potatoes. So, maybe trying the roost out method, maybe doing, growing them in straw, or just in the back somewhere in a compost pile. I don't know for sure how we're going to do that, but I at least want to grow potatoes in the buckets again, but I want to have those buckets out here where they can be automatically watered. All right, so that is going to be it for today. Thank you for joining me over the last handful of days as we went through this kind of evaluation of our garden. I see a lot of stuff out here right now. I'm just kind of surrounded by things that I can see that need to be harvested. We are working on cleaning up the garden at this point. So yesterday I cleaned up one bed. I spent like an hour just cleaning up the whole bed, and it was really nice. So now we are going to be overhauling all of the rest of the beds and getting them ready for our second succession of sowing summer things, and mostly our fall sowing of things. So that'll probably be the next couple videos, is us just cleaning up the garden. The other thing too is, like I said in a couple videos back and showed you, the garden completely got away from us when our baby was born. And so a lot of this is just cleanup. I actually really, really love this time of year in the garden over the fall and winter, because all of the stuff that you're actually growing is really easy and takes like no maintenance. But it's really a chance for us to clean things up, to expand on the garden, and dream about what we're going to do with it next year. So I really, really like that. There is kind of a bittersweetness to it. It makes me really sad to say goodbye to the summer garden. This was going to be a hard one to say goodbye to. This is the garden I grew when I was pregnant and sick all the time. And, we brought our baby home into this garden. So yeah, I'm getting emotional now. So before I get too far in my feelings, I'm going to end here. But thank you for joining me today. And I will see you on the next couple videos, hopefully, where we are cleaning this up and getting ready for our next fall garden. So that'll be really fun. So I hope you enjoyed this, and happy growing. I'll see you next time. Bye.